but the recording is in progress, so I have to begin with the Al-Fatiha, and we're going to do this in a manner that's what we use. What I do is I say it in Arabic, and then I use the English translation. But we're going to start off with saying A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, meaning that we seek refuge with Allah from the rejected enemy. So I begin with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. It means for us, the Basmillah says, I begin with the signature of Allah, who is most gracious and most merciful. I begin with the signature of Allah. The signature are the signs in nature. That's called the signature. Who has done all of that? Our source creator. When you go, as we was told, when you go to cash a check and there's no signature on there, the guy's gonna say, wait a minute, we can't, well, this my boss. He told me, no. You have to go back and give me that number so we can call him.
That's true.
Make sure that we're dealing with the right person. It's that signature, the signs in nature that are called ayats, based on observation. Those signs in nature are outside that we can see and in ourselves. We have the same chemicals. We have the water, the oxygen. We have the fire, and we have the culture. All that's inside of us. The next, the verse 2 of Al-Fatiha says, Alhamdu lillahi rabbil alameen. That means all the praises is due to the Creator. Oh, there's a lot of times you hear people say the word Allah, they subhanahu wa ta'ala glorified to him. But then when they say Prophet Muhammad, they say sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So wait a minute. La ilaha illallah. The Creator, there's no partnership with the Creator. Either you or the Creator or creation. It's no middle ground. There's no middle ground in numetics and giving us the opportunity to appreciate what is being delivered to us. When it says Rabbil Alameen, that means the Creator is a nourisher, sustainer of all the systems of knowledge. And the systems of knowledge is called Alama, Ain, Lam, and Meen. But we'll go into that later. But we're talking about inside of each human being is a human's mind, a triune brain, the neocortex, the mammalian, and the reptilian complex. To make it simple, Adam, Eve, and the serpent. The seed lettuce is going to bring us to see things that are already in our mind. And we'll remind it again, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, that this source creator is the most compassionate, the most merciful that we've ever seen. Where are you going to go? Where can you show me a place that I can go that no matter what I do, that the creator, that person will forgive me? Over and over and over and over and over and over again. Right here, right now, inside. It's called that energy. That inner G is called is that dynamic that we have in ourselves. We already, like the song goes, we're already a star. No one. We are unique down to our fingertips. There will be never another you. Never. So we need to take this human potential and understand that we don't want to be taken by surprise, meaning that Maliki Yawmiddin, the master of the day of Deen, which is called the big payback. You know, our international instructor, Benjamin Bilal, told us to try to veer away from the word religion, because religion means to realign. When you're gonna, just as you would do with your car, you start driving and your car start going someplace you ain't even turn to. So you have to realign. But with the deen, if you look at it backwards, there's a need that every human being has to have. That our source creator has created men and jinn for one purpose: to be a slave, to be a spiritual slave to the source creator. And it says, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. You do we worship. Your aid do we seek. You do we worship. When the deal goes down, when everything is wrong, then we know the name of the source creator. Somebody hit you in the head with a baseball bat. You ain't gonna say, "Oh man, that kind of hurt." You're gonna reach out. You're gonna reach out. Oh my God. Now we have the opportunity through Qur'Anics is to understand what we understand, so we can be able to feed other people. That's our main job. Our main job is the individual that transfers everything to the community life. There was a time when we would say, when the prophet was told by the angel Jibril about the neighbor, such that the person was saying, like, I'm gonna have to give some special consideration to this neighbor. All we talking about here is community life. You want for your brothers and sisters what you want for yourself, because ihdinas siratal mustaqim, guide us to where the straight path. What's the straight path? Fataha. If you change the F and the P, you have path. But you have to have that open mind when you come in here. The Qur'Anic says any person that's going to do research comes to the table with an open mind. You don't come to any perceived understanding. You take that cup what you have and put to the side and get a new cup. So after this is finished, you can leave with two. The last thing is Siratu Ladina and Amta Alayhim Gairil Makadubi Alayhim Waladori. This straight path that we have been blessed with, we want to make sure that we want to be pleasing to our source creator in this world and the next. Because it says, our creator, give us good in this world and in the hereafter, and protect us from the torment of the fire, those blazing things in ourselves. That's the enemy. The enemy is the enemy. We are our own worst enemy. Now we have an opportunity to open up our mind, to get the opportunity to see the blessings that the source creator has given us. And I would like to say this about Qur'Anics. It reminds me of Surah 55:13. It says, which of the favors of your creator do you deny? We see each other and say, well, how you do? You woke up this morning. That's a gift. And the day is called what? Present. A present. Each and every day, if we wake up, we were given a present. And we supposed to use this day. Instead of saying good morning, we say good day. We want this all day long. We don't want to miss 1 ounce of bringing out those seed letters, so we can get the opportunity to not only to learn, but to spread to someone else. It's my advice to get somebody that's not here, so you can have somebody to talk with. So you know what I learned today in Qur'Anics? Oh man, let me just share this with you. Each letter is a word. Did you know that? Each letter is a word. Yes, each letter is a word. And 2 letters, because in the beginning, it wasn't trilateral words. It was bilateral words too. You had the farmer who was cultivating the land, got the crops, and then sold them. And then that merchant took it and sold it and took it other places. At this particular time, all of us began with trilateral roots, because these seed letters then become root words. Then they become branches of knowledge. Rabbil Alameen. So at this particular point, we want to be able, with Nunetics, to keep an attentive ear, a silent tongue, and a faithful heart. We got to learn to listen, and then listen to learn, so we can be able to glean, to take up. We give them the plate. Nunetics is like a plate of vegetables. Don't go back to get any more food till you eat what's on your plate. We want to be served, and we have an excellent chef. It's higher than a chef. It's called an Epicurean. An Epicurean is the one who will not serve any food until the peas and the soup and the meat all has that consistent temperature before they give it to you. So this is what, in my opinion, Qur'anic is all about. And if you ever went to a restaurant, you see a circle in the door where they could flip it open, because the Epicurean wants to see how he presented the meal and how you was going to taste it. If you get there and you look at the meal and you start to get some pepper and salt, he'll come right, wait a minute, did you taste the food yet? No, I'm used to, no. Nunez is this is not something that you get used to doing. No, this is a whole complete idea. It understands that you have more than a blank slate. That's what is called a skewed perception. It also puts you behind the 8 ball before you even come up the bat. The greatest thing we have is our own mind. It's called an akal. And given this opportunity with Nunetics, not only will we be able to see, 2 things we'll have that's guaranteed. We'll have sight, and then we'll have insight. So I would like to hopefully that I had given you some information that, like they say, that'll wet your whistle. But I really want to say that knowledge, which does not feed the life of the intellect, is dead. We want to cultivate ourselves again. We want to begin to rise. We want to begin to start like the roots. We want to start shooting up. We want to have the sunshine and the moisture to cultivate our mind again, to take advantage of what we have. And I believe that Nunetics is that way. Stay with me, because I'm going to stay with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to do one thing, to serve. Thank you.
Yes, sir, and thank you. I'd like for you to turn your microphone over to our instructor, Muhammad Alim Ali, who's going to open us up with a short quotation from the words of Imam Walathuddin Muhammad. So thank you to our executive senior instructor, Adib Abdullah of Philadelphia, PA, the city of brotherly and sisterly love. And he's shown a lot of love to his fellow learners tonight by sharing that precious information. Thank you, sir. We appreciate you. Muhammad Alim Ali, open up your microphone, please.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you loud and clear, 5 by 5. Take it from
me.
Alaikum salam.
I'd like to share something with the learners that I sent to you. And I named it, I talked about a verification of what we're talking about. So to verify basically it means to substantiate and to find the truth about. So what I'm getting ready to share with you is quotes from Imam Muhammad. Imam Muhammad says, scripture, you must read the hints for revelation. They might have had more than one God doing it. Somebody did. They know they could not do it. So that is common knowledge. When you read the surface of religion, especially the Genesis, whether it's coming from the Bible or from the Quran, when you just read the surface and do not read the hints and references, you are not getting anything but common knowledge. That is not revelation. The revelation is what is being spoken through those concrete things. The concrete things are like hieroglyphics. The sun means something in the language of hieroglyphics. The moon means something in the language of hieroglyphics. A blade of glass means something in the language of hieroglyphics. That is the ancient lost language of the ancient Egyptians. All those physical things, when they wrote that, is what they put in the language, the object of creation. And you have to know what those objects meant to understand what they were communicating. Their conversation at the table had objects from creation. If you read their language and don't see anything but a sun, you don't see anything but a moon, you don't see anything but a canoe, you can't read their language. You have to know what the canoe is saying as a word or as a picture with a message, excuse me. Those who decipher hieroglyphics, they reveal hieroglyphics to their students or to their associates. They are revealing it because they are bringing out what you can't see, a light. Praise be to Allah. And in my conclusion, Imam Muhammad says, God made man means he created an intellect. So when God says he created man, do you think he's talking about this flesh and blood? No, God is talking about he created an intellect that was going to come to him, find him with the power of his heart, spirit and mind, mainly the mind, because until the mind comes on, you don't have human life. That is why a long time ago I said, man means mind. Isn't that what I told you? And if you have no mind, you have no man. Praise be to Allah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you. That was very inspiring words from Imam Wadathuddin Muhammad. And indeed, it is correct. And we're going to give you further proof of the connections to that level of wisdom in just a moment when we begin our subject officially. Let me just begin by saying, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, with Allah's signature, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. And Allah signs off on all things that he approves of. And that's the purpose of a signature. Whenever you apply your signature, as our Imam Adib Abdullah was explaining to you earlier, you're applying that signature with a level of authority from an authority figure. And Allah, being the ultimate authority figure, has allowed the human being who is being obedient to the will and the purpose under which he has and she has been created by that source creator. When we are obedient to that will, then Allah allows for us to sign off on everything that he has created. That is what is called the khair in the Quran. That means good and purposeful, good and beneficial, good because it is useful in the life of the human being. And those are the only things that Allah signs off on. If it's going to be detrimental to your human life, Allah does not approve of it. If it's going to be something that's going to cause unnecessary schisms in your human life, dividing your intellect from your emotions, and then dividing your emotions from your instincts, and then dividing, and then dividing the man from the woman and the elderly from the young, and Allah doesn't approve of that. They're not sanctioned through the signatures in nature. Nature supports unison. Nature supports wholeness. So that's the purpose of us paying attention to the signs in nature called ayat, because it is the signs in nature, we repeat once again, that represents the signature or the signs in nature created by Allah. So keep that in mind as we
Assalamu
proceed.
alaikum.
Alaikum
Both
salam.
both recordings on?
Yes, they are. One is I'm having a problem with the audio, but the video is fine.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. So Muhammad Alim Ali, he mentioned the word hieroglyphs as he was quoting Imam W.D. Muhammad. And a thought popped in my mind because I used to study hieroglyphs very, very carefully. In fact, it's the reason why my second book called The N-Word was written. It's based solely on the hieroglyphs found on the walls of ancient Egypt that the English-speaking world drew their alphabet from. The 26 letters in English are not directly out of the Hebrew language. They're actually more correctly off of the walls of ancient Egypt, beginning with the capital letter A, which is just a reflection of the major pyramid sitting right there in Giza in Egypt. That's what your letter A is. All right. And because the A is the leading letter, it's because the Egyptians saw themselves as the leading thinkers in the world. So everything that they did, everything that they accrued was a reflection of how they saw themselves as the de facto leaders in society. And that is until the Greeks and the Romans and others came into Egypt for conquering sake and lost, and then had to couple with those people in order to attempt to take over the rest of the world. So the Greeks and the Egyptians decided to work together, and that's what produced America. According to Imam Muhammad, he said, America is nothing but a combination of the philosophies and the ideologies and the psychologies that came out of ancient Egypt and ancient Greece. So whatever you're looking at as symbols and sigils and picture language, which is what hieroglyphs are, they're picture language. But remember now, the word hiero in hieroglyph is also connected to the word Hira that Muslims speak about, being the cave that Muhammad the Prophet first received revelation in. So Hira obviously is the first step towards revelation. Hieroglyphs and understanding that picture language is the first step towards understanding language, generally speaking. It's the first door that you have to go through. You have to go through the cave of Hira. You want to know where that cave of Hira is in you? It's right here. It's right here. It's the human intellect. So these are the things that we have to be made aware of. And if you come through this door, it's just a matter of time before you, in relationship to other people who you share that initial knowledge with, you will eventually become their hero. So if you come through the cave of Hira and you develop Hira to the point where you're able to understand the hiero or the higher understandings of things, then that higher understanding of things is going to cause you to become a hero among your family members, amongst your neighbors, amongst your co-workers, and in the world that you frequent on a daily basis. You will become the hero, no doubt. And you will become the go-to person that they come to when they're trying to figure out serious matters in life. When they're trying to figure out what the score of the baseball game was last night and who won and who should have won and all that, they're not going to come to you for that. When they're trying to figure out what number to play at the lotto, they're not coming to you for that. But when they're trying to figure out serious matters related to human growth and development and what kinds of serious attention we should be giving to serious problems in society, they're going to come to you for that. Because you, whether you realize it or not, if you keep truth, honesty, and justice in front of people, you're going to naturally become their hero. So keep that in mind. So we're going to go into a topic today that I have entitled The Logic of Qur'anic Arabic Letters. Now that might sound like a simple topic, but if you know anything about international instructor Benjamin Bilal, I don't like to do things in a simple manner. I like to do things in an easy manner, but it's not always going to be simple. You have to put your thinking caps on. You have to strap your seatbelts on when you come for these levels of linguistic rides, because this highway is truly a highway. There's no low ways in the directions that we are charting and traveling in. There's only highway. We call it the Sirat al-Mustaqim, the straight up highway. Straight up highway. And when you ask people to be straight up with you, you're asking them to be honest. And that's what as-Sirat al-Mustaqim is. It is that highway leading up to higher and higher, see, higher and higher levels of human achievement. And you can do nothing on that highway except ascend. That's what as-Sirat al-Mustaqim is. So we're going to be looking at how that progression actually takes place and the sequence that it is taking place in based on how language itself has been unfolding over thousands and millions of years, I'm sure. So if you're not familiar with that history, I would ask you pay double and triple attention to tonight's lesson. It's going to be, as I said in the email, unlike anything you've ever learned, especially concerning the Arabic language. And I would even say language in general. You just haven't learned it like this. So again, the logic of Qur'anic Arabic letters on this Sunday, August 7th, 2022. Thank you for entering the doors of the university online learning course, especially those of you who are new, those of you who are first timers, second timers, third timers, 10th timers. We invite you to join us officially if you have not done so, but it's okay. For as long as we're giving out free information and public information, you're free to join us with no pressure to do anything except sit, listen, and learn. So there's a term called al-ishtiqaq al-akbar. Al-ishtiqaq al-akbar. And al-ishtiqaq is the Arabic term for the system of etymology. We simply call it etymology in English, but the word etymology, etym means true. It points back to the true meanings of words. In other words, where words actually come from. And etymology meanings normally trace back much further than your standard dictionary meanings for words. So you're going to have your Merriam-Webster dictionaries, you're going to have your collegiate dictionaries, you're going to have all of these other variations of dictionaries that the Western world has produced especially, but they're not necessarily going to trace you back or trace that word back, take you back and trace the word back to its origin. If you look at etym, I want you to think atom, A-T-O-M, because the etymology meaning for a word is the atomic meaning for a word. And just as all things in physical creation have atoms as their constitution, all words in all languages have etym or etymology as their basic constitution. But as science has been able to present to you, the idea that the atom is still not the smallest molecule or the smallest thing in creation. It's not the smallest particle. It's not the smallest. They thought it was the smallest, and that's why they called it atom. A means not, and T-O-M means divided into two. So what they were saying when they first discovered the atom is that this is the smallest particle that creation has produced, and there's nothing smaller than this. This cannot be divided into two, or it cannot be divided any further until they continued in their scientific pursuits and found out that there is something smaller than the atom. And that's when they started coming out with discoveries concerning quarks and even things smaller or more divisible than the actual quark. So this is science, and this is also language. And in the same way that etymology has presented us with root words for words, this science that we have now called Nunetics has gone beyond the atomic meaning for words and is now tracing words back to their very seed letters and meanings. The seed letter being the actual letter itself, not just the origin of the word, but the origin of the letters that comprise that word. That's what Nunetics is. So it's not simply Arabic etymology, it's Arabic etymology to the 10th power, because we snatch those very letters and separate them out into individual letters and then give you meanings for those individual letters that are tied indirectly, not to any scholar, not to any set of books, not to any school of thought, but those meanings are directly tied to Allah's fitrah, meaning Mother Nature herself. That's where these meanings come from, straight from Mother Nature. So if you're going to argue with Nunetics, you're going to find yourself arguing with Mother Nature. And if you try to fool Mother Nature herself said in a commercial about a few decades ago that it's not nice to fool with Mother Nature. She can come back with a vengeance. So argue with Nunetics if you want. You'll argue till your lips fall off, trying to argue with the tree and the cloud and the air and the four basic elements. And you try to argue with the facts that they present to you when you study them under the microscope, you're just wasting your time. And that's why nobody challenges what Instructor Benjamin Bilal has to say, not about language. You might challenge me in some other areas, but when it comes to identifying the meanings for these letters, there's no challenge there. I haven't gotten a challenge, and not a single challenge in the 40 some odd years that I've been teaching this. And if you continue to listen, you'll understand why. Current dictionaries that are in existence as we speak, they are actually too far developed to determine what individual consonants actually mean. They're too far gone. They're too far developed. Many of the people who put these dictionaries together never even knew that letters had meanings. So that has not been their concentration. They've been concentrating on syllables and what syllables represent, and they've been concentrating on what root words mean, especially in these Semitic languages like Arabic and Hebrew, etc. So it's going to actually take new linguistic scholars to produce dictionaries which trace sounds, letters, and words. See? Our dictionaries that we're going to produce, inshallah, in our lifetime and the lifetime of our babies to come, those dictionaries are not only going to give you meanings for words, they're also going to give you meanings for the letters that those words comprise. And then even further than that, they're going to give you meanings for the sounds that those letters are producing. And that's a beautiful journey for sure, because it's going to trace all of those things back to their original fitrah-based values. And this is what the science of Nunetics is all about. Language begins through the identification of three things. The first identification is related to the parts of the human body. The second identification is related to people and things in the immediate environment. And the third identification is based on abstract values. We identify words as abstract values, meaning things that we're not necessarily seeing with our physical eyes, but we're seeing it as a relationship. Pardon me, not sure what happened to my notes. Give me just one moment. Let's see here. You guys are not seeing my notes right now, are you?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Give me one
sir.
moment. All right. One moment. All right, folks, when you come into the queue, try not to do anything different, because somebody accidentally took over the sharing of my screen, and that's why it disappeared. So just be aware of that. Don't do anything different than just hit the link. It's not difficult. Just hit the link. Come on and join us. Don't mess around with other buttons and commands and all the rest of that stuff. Not necessary. All right, you can see my notes again, I hope.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, let's have a good time then. Mute your phones if you're not the one speaking. Thank you. So again, language begins by identifying with three levels of communication coming from three places. The first part, I repeat, are parts of the body. They communicate messages to us. The second one is people and things in the immediate environment outside of our physical body. And the third one is in the abstract values, such as in the relationships that we have between people, places, and things. All right, we have relationships between people, places, and things. When we go to grandma's house, there's a relationship between leaving our house and arriving at grandma's house. And we're used to looking at the ride and looking at the signs and identifying and memorizing the various streets that we go down, where we're going to turn. And you know that final turn that takes you on the right or to the right. And around that right corner is going to be grandma's house. And we anticipate being there. But it's an idea in our minds that becomes the relationship. It's the idea of the relationship and the warm treatment and the warm hugs and the, you know, the ice cream or whatever you think you're going to get from grandma today. It's the relationship that's in your mind as an idea as you approach grandma's house. So grandma's house becomes the abstract idea. So those are the three levels of communication. Now, the Arabic language is estimated to be between 4,000 and 6,000 years old. Some would just settle for 5,000 years old. It began as a bilateral language. Bilateral simply means that it was constituted of two consonants. Ba, that kind of thing. Da, ha, just two letters. That's how the Arabic language originally came to us. And when it was a bilateral language, it only consisted of several hundred words. Those words grew into many thousands of words only after a third letter or a third radical was added to form trilateral words. So the Arabic language began as a two-consonantal language called bilateral. Bi means two. And some smart people decided to look at those bilateral words and they began adding a third letter or what's called a third radical to the bilateral words, which made the bilateral tri, meaning three, trilateral. T-R-Y, if you're listening by phone. My suspicion is that open-mouthed sounds that are now called vowels were the first attempt on the part of humans at forming intelligent verbal communication. I believe that language began as a series of gestures or body movements, gestures. When people are directly in front of you or when people are within your purview and you can see them and they can see you, sometimes there's really no need for any kind of sophisticated verbal communication. Sometimes you can communicate, and you notice this about certain people who are known now in history for communicating through gestures. The Italians, they say, the Jews, they say these people speak with their hands, or sometimes they say people speak with their eyes, right? Because these are things that people in front of you can actually see and know exactly what you're saying and what you mean when they look at what it is you're doing as a gesture. There are vulgar gestures, we know that. And there are gestures of love, open arms, gestures of crying out to the source creator with hands raised high into the sky. Those are universal gestures that speak to the same phenomenon in the minds of people who view those gestures, but they can all be done without saying a word, without mumbling a sound. Very important to understand what it is we're saying now about language. And again, I believe that these original sounds, what they call primal or even primitive sounds, those first sounds, one moment, I just have to let some people in. Okay, here we go. Those first sounds were open-mouthed sounds called vowels. A, I, U, A, E, I, O, U, those sounds. I believe, based on my evidence, that those sounds called vowels were the first utterances from human mouths once they had an urge in them to get beyond gestures. When gestures were not enough, as societies began to burgeon and become broader and broader, and people began to move away from the immediate family that they were living with and began to form tribal groups, and those tribal groups began to occupy regions outside of the eyesight and earshot of people in that immediate environment. And they had to begin trying to communicate sophisticated or more sophisticated messages than the ones that they could just shout out with the vowels. Okay? I want to eat, I'm ready to eat. All right, well, what about the person who couldn't see you do that? What about the tribe now way down there that couldn't hear you say what it is you were trying to say? So now the human mind is urged, and this is a prompt that is placed into human nature by virtue of the way that Allah created the human brain. He created the human brain with urges to grow, urges to expand, and to encompass more and more so that its potential would reach its climax eventually. So I believe that it began as a series of body movements and that it graduated to become verbal monosyllabic expressions. Monosyllabic means those vowels that we were referring to. That's one, mono. Ooh, right? Now that might sound funny to you, but that's the language of every infant when that infant is born. Think about that. So I'm just following the logic of the fitrah. So those utterances, those monosyllabic utterances were especially rooted in emotionally charged utterances. So I'm adding another piece to this puzzle now. It wasn't just that they were going ooh, no. Every one of those monosyllabic utterances were charged with an emotional foundation supporting them. And I'm going to tell you why I think that was. For the same reason that the baby has emotionally charged utterances connected to its need to articulate its concerns. It's because utterances are not enough to communicate what this sophisticated brain is in the process of helping you to deliver and communicate. Utterances, it doesn't fit the bill. So the body itself becomes frustrated that it is saying something to you, but you're not responding because you truly don't understand what the infant is saying. You have to guess, or you have to look at the patterns, or you have to listen to the timbre of the cry sometimes, the intensity of the cry to know, oh no, he's not hungry, he's wet. You know, mothers can figure this out like that. Fathers have a more of a difficult time figuring out the differences in the frequencies of the baby's voice to know this cry from that cry from the third cry. Fathers are not usually good at that. Some can be, but most are not. It's usually the mother's finely tuned ears and nature that knows practically right away what that baby is crying about. But the baby's cry is undergirded by some deep emotional concern like hunger. All right. So much like your average mammal, this was probably the time in our history, our human history, prior to the development of the brain's cerebral cortex layer of brain tissue. So I want you to just pay more attention now to how mammals, these common animals, how they communicate. And you're going to find out that their communication is also undergirded by some emotion. It can be extreme happiness, the monkey, excitement. It's going to be some emotion. Or sometimes you'll hear animals like even the elephants cry. They're not speaking like we know speaking. They're not talking words necessarily, but they're primal sounds. Those, even the dogs, rough. You can tell when that dog is about to get you, but you can tell when he's playing. Right? These are sounds, again, that are undergirded by particular levels of emotionality, not rationality, emotionality. That's the mammal, and that same nature is in the human psychic development also as we grow. And it's definitely clocked into the infant's development. The infant comes here instinctive, knowing when it's hungry, when it's thirsty, when it needs to rest, when it needs its security and safety and comfort in the arms of the mother or whoever. That's instinctive. So they're born with that. They were getting that while they were still in gestation within their mother's belly. They were getting that kind of comfort. Sometimes the thumb in their mouth, just sleeping away, right? So when they come here, the emotional brain becomes activated. The instinctive brain was already activated in the womb. But the emotional brain now, how they're feeling about these different sensations that are bombarding their nervous system, and that begins to develop. And then lastly, once they begin to open up to information coming from the environment, from things that are happening in the environment, things that their five senses are beginning to capture as information, that's when the intellect begins to develop. So they go from being born as instinctive beings, and the instinctive nature is actually their spiritual nature. That's the baby's spirituality, instincts. You didn't teach it. Allah taught it. So it's spiritual. Then it grows into its emotional development, and becomes emotionally inclined. And then that final stage is when they grow into a more intellectual grasp of the things that are going on around them. And we'll give more details in just a moment. So it goes from the reptilian complex, which is instinctive, to the limbic complex, which is emotional, and to the neocortex complex, which is intellectual. Every human being goes through this development. And you can see in the development of the traditional modern human and what is left as a skull for most of us, when compared to the so-called primal or primitive human head, you can see a substantial difference in that this part of the brain that in this skull on the left is occupied by a developed neocortex thinking brain. It's absent here in the more primitive brain, which means what? That the more primitive brain grew to become an instinctive brain, and then grew to become a limbic brain controlling emotions and memory. But then it had not experienced the final stage of the brain's development called the neocortex brain. It wasn't here yet. Allah had not yet developed it. That's why Allah calls himself Rabb, which means not only creator, but the one who also evolves creation stage by stage, giving it its proper nourishment so that it can grow to fulfill whatever its destiny is created for it by Allah. But again, that happened in human history. We weren't born with a developed neocortex. It had to develop in time. And this is why different words are given for the human structure in the Quran. In one place, Allah might refer to humans as ins. In another place, he may refer to humans as an-nas. In a different place, he's going to refer to humans as al-insan. Those are three consecutive and respective developments within human history, the history of human growth and development and evolution. That's how we need to read the Quran. It's not a mundane book. It's not a book of geography and scientific thinking and it's going to tell you what Freud did and what he did wrong. And that's not what the Quran is. The Quran is, in fact, a cosmic reading. It takes the best of what you are to enjoy on the earthly level, and it connects that development with information that you cannot come into unless Allah reveals it to you, because it's cosmic information. So this is where we were on the right, and this is where we are presently on the left. And we have more development to go. So the primitive brain on the right is clearly devoid of the space for a top layer of neocortex exhibited by the modern brain skull on the right. I should say on the left, pardon me. Yeah, the modern one is on the left, yes, and the primitive one is on the right. Let's make that correction. One moment. Okay. Vowels are emotional vocalizations that developed prior to consonants being developed. So we all have heard of vowels and consonants. What I'm postulating right now is that vowels came first. Vowels came first. When the brain grew that neocortex that we were discussing, the capacity for rational assessment of information became the prominent feature. So prior to that, the propensity for registering things emotionally was what the brain was used to. Whenever it would run into anything in its environment, the first and probably the only response would be emotional, outside of the instinctive drive to fight or flee. That's instinct. But above that, the only thing we could do when we met new people, met a new tribes member from across the lake or something like that, our first reaction was going to be emotional, not rational, but emotional, until that neocortex began to grow. And the neocortex began to grow due to the challenges of an ever increasing and expanding connection to other people. See, the social nature is what grew the capacity for that new brain to be able to absorb as a neocortex decision-making brain, because there was a lot more to decide on. When it was just you and your little tribe and your little family group and your little griot telling the stories, that wasn't much to have to be super rational about. But when you began to meet other people who didn't look like you, they didn't talk or sound or dress or smell or eat or sleep like you, now the brain had more of a challenge. And it was the effort to make that challenge less of a challenge that began to grow that neocortex brain. The word neo means new. That's a prefix. It means new cortex, telling you right there that it's a new development in the history of the human brain, or the newest development. So this, of course, happened over a long and protracted period of time. The development of that third brain, the neocortex brain, didn't happen overnight. It happened over probably thousands and maybe millions of years in human history. The fitra hint for this development is in the development of the newborn baby and its soft spot. You've heard your mama and your grandma talk about the baby's soft spot on top of his head. They say, don't touch that baby on top of his head, because that part of his brain is still open and developing. It's open and developing. So it's an area of the brain where the pineal is, that they call the soft spot. And they say, don't touch it there. You see how Allah has placed his natural protection over something that is going to become the leading source and the leading force in the human life? That is pineal activation. And we're going to talk about what that actually is and take it out of Spooksville and bring it into Yourville so that you'll understand it. So those are the three levels: neocortex, which controls speech and logic and higher thinking skills. That's the last part of the brain to develop, that neocortex. And it's got a bunch of questions, see, a bunch of questions. And sitting in the middle, protected by the top and the bottom, is the limbic system, and it controls the emotions and the memory. In the middle, the limbic brain, also called the mammalian brain, because all mammals, all animals have this level of brain, and the animals don't go beyond this. And then you go down to the instinctive brain, which is the reptilian brain. So life forms that are traveling on top of the earth, those life forms began on the reptilian level. They came out of the sea and they began to occupy the shore and other parts of the land. And those reptilians were then given an extra boost of life force to eventually become what we know now to be the common animals. And again, this happened over millions, maybe billions of years of the history of life forms on this earth. And then eventually, as we showed you with the two skulls, the humans that were occupying emotional brains, and that was it, eventually grew into the higher brain called the neocortex, which allowed them then to begin speech, making sense, logic, and thinking on levels much higher than the levels needed for simple one-on-one or family to family or tribal to tribal communication. They didn't need that down here necessarily, but as soon as they began to meet up with more and more people, they then needed those skills. So Allah gave it to them. Allah gives you what you need, and understand this also. If he gives you what you need and you don't use it, then he takes it away from you. That's the other thing human beings need to really clock in, that Allah can give you something, and if you prove that you're not using it, you don't value it, you're not taking care of it, he takes it away from you. Nature does it. It's not really Allah doing it directly. He's instructed Mother Nature to take those things away. When when life came out of the sea, like the catfish now, he's like halfway between sea and land. Well, when he came out of the sea and he's showing that he doesn't need to be in the sea, he can breathe out here. He doesn't need to breathe in the ocean. Then Allah takes away the apparatus that he needed for breathing in the ocean, and he substitutes it for what he needs to breathe on land. And he might have some vestige of a fin or something, but if he's not using it on the land, Allah will tighten those fins up and they become little hands now with little projectiles because he needs that on the land.
Excuse me, instructor.
Yes.
Yahya is waiting to be let in.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Here we go. Let me see if I can find him. All right. Hold on.
Assalamu alaikum. There's also Brother Frank and Sister Salima that are trying to get in, and I don't know, maybe Sister Sultan is trying to get in as well. Each of them have reached out to me.
All right, give me one moment. Let me see if I can find them. Everybody who's trying to come in is not necessarily showing up. Let me just stop my picture for one moment. We'll get back to it so that I can see more clearly. Oh, there they go. Hold on. Is what happened when you come to school, when you come to class late. Your teacher ever do that in grade school? You try to get in the door locked.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm just changing apparatuses. This is
I know. I saw you in earlier. I saw you in earlier. But I'm gonna mess with people anyway. That's what I do. It's my job. Keep you on your toes. All right. So thank you for that. Everyone else, mute your phones, and we will continue. And away we go. If I can find my notes, here we go. All right. Thank you all for being with us. We're not going to be here all night long tonight. So let me get through these notes. Thank you for your patience. All right. So we discussed those three levels of the human brain called the triune brain. And we're going to push past this to get to some of the main points of the Arabic language itself. So babies begin by expressing primal vowel sounds before expressing consonantal sounds. Let me make sure we understood that. Babies born, they begin expressing primal open-mouthed vowel sounds. And that's typical of the baby when she cries. Mouth is open. Ain't no T sounds and all those other sounds, B sounds, all that comes later. When the baby comes here and they let out that first cry that activates the lungs, that's an open A sound. Ah, right? The vowel sound, all right? And it's not too long after that that they begin to formulate other sounds that become consonantal sounds. And again, it is my belief based on my research that the very first consonantal sound that develops in the mouth of a baby is the sound of the letter M. M. Now I'm going to tell you why. Because when the baby cries due to hunger and its mouth is wide open, waiting for its mother to do something about it, when the mother sticks that breast, that nipple into the baby's mouth, as you all know, especially if you've been mothers or are mothers, that baby immediately goes from the ah of the open mouth to the of the closed mouth, suckling. And that closed mouth is that's the M sound. So the baby goes from ah to I want you to think about that, because that represents what is probably, according to Instructor Bilal, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. That sound is probably the first human word spoken by the infant. What is that word? Am and And what does that mean? Anybody
Mother.
can tell me. There you go. Mother. That's Am, and M are the words used all over the world for mother. Isn't that beautiful?
Yes.
Yeah, they're gonna try and tell us that females are inferior behind that one. If females are inferior, nobody told Allah. He didn't get that memo, because he made the female the one that actually is responsible for the very first human word, not just sound, but human word spoken by human beings. That's beautiful.
Muhammad said, Chinese baby do not cry in Chinese.
No baby cries in Chinese or English or Spanish. Every baby cries in Fitra. But I'm going to ask that people not, unless I ask you to open up your mic and give me a comment. We can be all night on comments. We're not going to do that. Reserve them for the chat box or for an email or something, or else I won't get through this if I respond to all of your wonderful comments. I love it when you do, but it detracts from where I need to go. So thank you. Now, the infant, as we said earlier, is born with an instinctive nature and a developing emotional nature that, for all intents and purposes, forms the basis of its primal attention. As the intellect expands, the emotionality is put more into check. Follow the logic of this. As the intellect begins to come into more and more and more information coming into the five senses, beating down upon the baby's nervous system, making that baby take notice of things that it sees, hears, smells, tastes, and touches. As the intellect begins to expand, especially when they see or experience these things over and over again, and the intellect starts to become curious about it, like, I know this picture here. I know her, I know that guy is his father. I know he keeps popping up. So the intellect becomes curious. All right, I have to let a few more people in. This is great. But my system for letting folks in is not okay. Here they go. They changed the technique in this Zoom system here. Okay, so everyone should be in now. All right. So when those things happen over and over again, the intellect becomes curious, and that's what's responsible for the beginnings of the development of the intellect. See, the word intellect means internal election, things that you are choosing to do inside. Once information gets inside through the five senses, then you choose from there what the better thing is to do with that information. And if experience tells you that entertaining that information is going to be detrimental to you, like you knew here that putting your hand on that hot stove, that hurt. So the memory bank, that limbic brain, the memory bank says, I wouldn't do that again if I were you, right? So the disciplines that are beginning to develop for your emotional brain are now contributing to your neocortex brain in terms of its ability to think and make choices, make decisions. See, so those levels of the brain are actually feeding each other's growth and development. It's a beautiful process when you understand it. So the emotionality begins to become more and more restrained as the intellect begins to take charge. And as the emotionality becomes restrained, even your instinctive nature becomes more disciplined. Because as an infant in your diapers, you would just poo-poo and pee-pee in the diaper. But that's your instincts doing that. That's your body's instincts. That's what your body does on a regular basis. And it's going to be that way until you die. The body has a need to release filth. The body has a need to stay fed and, you know, satiated. It has a need to stay, whatever the word is for needing water. The body has that need from birth, right? But you grow into a discipline as you grow older that says, yeah, I have to go to the bathroom, but I'm not going to do it in my pants. See, so the body takes on that discipline. You get it? And in order for hydration, yes, thank you, Habiba, appreciate you. Right? So the body takes on that discipline, and that discipline becomes transferred so that the emotionality might become more disciplined, and even the instincts become more refined under the leadership of the intellect. A few more people to let in. Give me one moment. Let's see what we have here. Okay, I hope everyone has gotten in. We kind of crowded. Classroom's kind of crowded tonight. Hold on. Admit all. Okay, I think that did it. Here we go. All right, very good. Alhamdulillah. I don't mind those interruptions. If people are coming in, that's great. All right. So I hope you're able to follow this progress. As the intellect expands, the emotionality in you is put into more check. As that emotionality becomes restrained, even the instinctive nature becomes more disciplined. The introduction of spoken language into the human brain follows the same fitrah-based patterns of development as the three major aforementioned life forms. Those three life forms in a nutshell are the human life form, the mammal life form, and the reptile life form. This is in reverse order. It begins with the reptile, it advances to become the mammal, and the mammal advances to become the crown of creation, as the Bible calls the human being, the crown of creation. Once the baby begins to express biconsonantal sounds, two-letter sounds, they are references to concrete nouns existing within its immediate environment, beginning with its mother, its father, its siblings, and items within the home. Let me break this down for you so that you understand it. ABC, 1, 2, 3. When the baby begins to express two consonantal sounds, those are words in the mind of a baby. When the baby is going, ah, that's not a word. That's just a sound. Even when the baby begins to pronounce certain consonants like ba, ba, in the baby's mind, that's the beginning of the baby trying to tell you something about what it's experiencing. But it is not until it begins to double up on that consonant that it becomes a concrete idea, a noun in the mind of the baby. So when the baby says, bah, nobody really knows what she's talking about. But when she starts to go, baba, and she does it every time you put her bottle in front of her, baba, that becomes the bottle, right? Baba, baba. Or she begins to say, dada. When she was going, da, that could have been anything. But when she started saying, dada, every time she sees the father, that became daddy. And the same thing for ma, ma. That's the sound the baby was making every time it would pull off the mother's breath. Ma, ma, ma. But when the baby saw that same lady and said, mama, that became a word. That became a noun. And Allah says that he taught Adam the names of things, all of them. But the word for names in Arabic, asma, is the exact same word for nouns. So what does that tell you according to the Quran? That nouns came first. Some linguists said verbs came first, action words. No, nouns register first in the human brain. Although the babies see actions, they see the mother, they experience the mother picking them up, feeding them, etc. The urgency in the baby's mind is to identify the noun that's picking it up and feeding it and putting it down and giving it comfort and speaking sounds to it. The human brain wants to process what that is as a person, place, or thing in its life. So that baby begins to express those biconsonantal sounds. And again, those are nouns, concrete nouns that are existing within its immediate environment. The baby doesn't even know who it is. You can put a picture of the baby in front of the baby. They're not going to say, me. Yes, that's me. You put the baby in front of the mirror, the baby still won't know that that's them, because newborn infants do not identify on the material level. They identify as spiritual beings. They only know themselves, and Imam Muhammad has said this on several occasions, that the newborn baby only knows itself spiritually. It's born into a spiritual existence, not a material one. You know the baby as a lump of flesh and blood and bones, but the baby only knows itself from the inside out. And that inside is what we're calling spiritual. All right? So when it begins to identify mommy and daddy and brother and sister, it's identifying nouns, people in its environment. And that's the first identification. All of these things are within close proximity. There's no way in the world that a baby is going to first identify Lowe's, or supermarket, when that's all the way across town. Even if they've been to Lowe's, the baby's not going to come home and talk about, hey, man, that was a nice trip to Walmart, wasn't it, this morning? No, they don't know nothing about what's all the way out there. The only thing that child knows is what is right here in front of it. Right here in front of it. So the first recognizable words are going to register in the baby's brain as nouns, meaning people, places, things, and even ideas can be nouns. And they are going to consist of bilateral or two consonantal letter sounds. So if you look at the Arabic language, you're going to find that the things and the people and the places that are closest to the infant consist of two consonantal sounds. Mother is alif, mim, called Alif, mim, two consonants. Father is alif, bait, or ba, two consonants. Brother is alif, kha, akh. Sister, alif, kha, ukh. Even the home is called the dar, dal, ra. That's it. Two consonants. That's how you know where the earliest words in the Arabic language are, because they're going to consist of the biconsonantal, not the triconsonantal words. The word for house itself, ba, ta, or bait, ta, diphthong in between. The word for a central gathering, like the gathering of the family in the house, jam, jim, mim, jam. And as I've pointed out to you, the most ancient expression in the Arabic language for the concept of a source creator is halla. It wasn't pronounced Allah to begin with. It was pronounced halla. And in order to verify that, you have to go into regions of the more southern, regions of the more northern parts of Arabia, parts connected to Jordan, parts connected to Petra, and even when you cross the river and you go into parts of continental Africa, where the Sudan is and some of the other places, they also had these pronunciations for the source creator. Halla. Sizable number of people speaking the Hebrew language there, because the letter ha and he were the definite articles in both the Arabic and the Hebrew language. That's why they have the word Habru or Hebrew. Their H-A and H-E means the. For the Arabic language, when that language began to become more situated in Southern Arabia, that's when the definite article went from ha to al. From ha to al. To the point now, whereas we have learned what a definite article is, it's reflected in the pronunciation al, like al-Islam, al-Qur'an. But in the upper regions of Arabia, it was ha. And this is where the Hebrew language and other related Semitic languages came into that phrase, hallelujah, hallelujah. Because hallel meant praise God. Hal meant praise, or the praised one, and el was the common word for God. The el became al, and then the meaning for God became el-ah or Allah. For the Jews of those days, it was Elohim, Elohim. But the shortened version of that is el. And that came to be the definite article al later on in the history of the development of the Arabic language. I hope that's clear. There's a lot to it, and I'm trying to give it to you in a way where it's not going to be confusing. So suffice it to say that these are the most primitive and the oldest pronunciations for these words in the Arabic language that we know of. So the source creator was called Halla. Later, they took the H off the front and they put it on the back, and it became Allah. Originally, it was Halla, and then it was changed to Allah with the H being on the back. Trilateral or three-letter root words are the result of an additional consonant being added to a bilateral set of existing letters. Now, this is obviously an academic class tonight. This is not entertainment. It never was. So if you came here for entertainment, you're wasting your time. Go watch Sunday Night at the Movies or something else that you could probably be more comfortable with. We only invite people who choose to think to join us in these classes. And that's most of you, obviously. It's not for entertainment. It's not for just turning off your brain and just listening to the sound of my voice and becoming entertained with my resonance or anything like that. That's not what these classes are for. These classes are for the serious students, particularly of those who were part and parcel of Imam W.D. Muhammad's environment, his word environment. You should be getting a lot out of what's being said here, but it's not just for them. It's for people who know nothing about W.D. Muhammad, Elijah Muhammad. You don't have to be a part of that experience. You don't even have to be a so-called Muslim to enjoy and benefit from the information that we're presenting. Out of all of the classes that I've ever given, I've never asked anyone to take a Shahada or Shahadatain. Out of all the Jumas, believe it or not, out of all of the Jumas I have taught, in my 30 some odd years of teaching Jumas, I've never asked anyone to take Shahadatain. Well, how come? I thought you was an Imam. Yeah, but I'm an Imam following the Imam called Muhammad the Prophet. Go find it in his literature where he invited people to take Shahada. That was an H-bomb. Ain't nowhere in the Quran where Allah says, go tell those people to say, Ashhadu la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. There ain't nowhere in the Quran. So why should it be in my khutbah? If they like what they hear, it's open for all. If they don't like what they hear, Allah says, let those who believe, believe. Let those who refuse to believe, refuse to believe. He didn't even say he's going to punish them for not accepting or not believing. What if the reason they're not believing is because of your presentation? What if the reason they're not believing is because of what they know you did that you shouldn't have been doing, and now you faking the funk, so to speak, up here with the grand old khutbah and all of the reams of Arabic coming out of your mouth every Friday, but they know you back there with somebody that ain't your wife. They know you back there with messing around with some child. They know you. They know you. So me taking a shahadatain predicated upon your words and your encouragement is nothing. You're supposed to introduce those people to the Quran and let them read the Quran for themselves and then come to you with questions. That's how they did Muhammad the Prophet. They say the Prophet interrupted, he allowed people to interrupt his Jummah. How many of you imams would do that today? You up there right in the middle of your Jummah, and somebody in the audience says, excuse me, preacher, I have a quick question. Brother, you do not interfere with the khutbah. You're so fierce with it, and when you say khutbah, you almost spit in the guy's eye. So how many of us would do that? They say the Prophet, this is in a hadith. They say somebody had a question. They say the Prophet stopped the khutbah, went and got something for the man to sit on so he'd be comfortable, sat right apart from him, knees to knees, and asked the man to just, what is your, and he didn't get up until he finished satisfying the questions that the man had. Then he got up and continued in the khutbah. How many of you imams would do that? Is my question. That's your challenge. If you're going to follow all of that stuff, as the Quran says, and follow the best thereof. I don't say excuse and get rid of all the hadith. I just say find the ones that are worthy and follow the best thereof. Just leave alone the ones that are trying to paint our prophet out as being a child molester, marrying girls at 6 and 9 and all of that, you leave those alone. But follow the best thereof. I think that makes sense. So going back to the letters. Trilateral root words are the result of an additional consonant being added to a bilateral set of existing letters. So if there are two consonants, like in the words that we mentioned, or like we mentioned, or bait, like we mentioned, or dar, like we mentioned, if there are just two consonantal connections, then the triconsonantal words were the result of someone adding a third letter called a radical, a third radical. In that regard, the bilateral, the two consonantal connected word, becomes what's called a proto-root word. So herein lies the difference between what we're doing with the Nunetics and what the average Arabic teacher is doing. The average Arabic teacher is teaching mostly from trilateral Arabic root words, which is fine. They exist, but they didn't exist first. The proto-root words that consisted of two consonants put together were the first words ever. And again, I repeat, you can witness that by just examining the words of in the vocabulary that are of things and people closest to you, beginning with your mother and father, beginning with your brother and sister, beginning with the place that you're in every day that you recognize as home, and the house from the outside. You see, that's my house. Two letters. Then the more the human being began to stretch out, his brain had to then make an accommodation for all of the new information that he was learning. So then he started adding a third letter and even maybe a fourth and a fifth letter in the Arabic language. That's how it grew. So let's look at the meanings for words once an additional letter is added to that proto-root word. In this case, the proto-root two consonant word is jam. Now it has a shedda on the meme, so it's going to have two M's when you spell it, but it didn't begin, not even with a double M. It began as J-A-M. That's it. That's it. But let's look at the words that come out of that J-M connection. The first one being jam. J-A-M-M-A, jamma. Let's look at what that means in the Arabic lexicon. It means to gather an abundance of something, to gather an abundance or to gather many or much of something. Jamma. Then we have jamada. What does that mean? It means to congeal, to harden, to stiffen, and to remain rigid. Now, all of these aspects are related to the meaning of the additional letter D in jamada. See, because jama by itself means to come together, to congeal. But the D is what's giving it the significance of becoming rigid, hard. Du, see, du, jamad, D, dal, dod, those sounds. It represents rigidity. You also have the word jama'a, which all of us should be familiar with. Jama'a. We call ourselves a jamia as a community. What does it mean? It means to gather, to collect, to combine, and it's referring mostly to people. These other things here can be referring to people. They can be referring to fruits that you picked off the tree. Jamma, an abundance of fruit. It could be referring to an abundance of trees in the forest. Jamma, the trees. Jamada could be referring to the congealing process. It didn't have to be people. In fact, it's not people it's talking about. It's talking about things that congeal and stiffen and harden, concrete, etc. But Jama'a is referring mostly to human beings who gather. And it refers to people who gather for a single purpose. And see, here's where you get into the very, very meticulously revealed ideas that Allah put in the Quran when he introduced these very special words, yet you have to pay careful attention to. Because Jama'a, which Allah refers to when he's referring to human beings who he's going to bring together, when Allah said to Adam and his company, get ye down from here, he said, get ye down from here as a jamia. As a jamia, that means all of you together and for a single purpose. See, you can have a whole bunch of people in a place, but they're not all there for the same thing. Now, if I say, okay, tomorrow at Walmart, we have a special sale on this new 72-inch television, and all of you come down there to trample grandma and all of that just to get your hands on that 72-inch television, you're all there for that single purpose, you are a jamia. Allah says he's going to gather the wrongdoers together on the day of judgment as a jamia. Why? Because they are all being gathered together for a single purpose, that purpose being punishment. So the jamia, just like in Jum'ah, which is from that same root, all of us in the Jum'ah, you're not there to hear a Sunday lecture from a Christian preacher. You're there to hear the imam and the khutbah and to take care of your responsibilities. So when we come to Jum'ah, we're following the principle of a jamia, and we're all there for the same purpose. We're not there for scattered purposes. We're there for a singular purpose. So when we say jama'a, that ayn at the end of it, that third radical that was added to jim, meme, or jm. Jm already means to gather, right? But the means that you're gathering together in a constrictive fashion. You feel how your throat constricts when you say That means everything is being gathered in a particularly constricted place, like the masjid. You don't let just anybody in there because they say they want to come in. They have to be there for that strict purpose. This is Jummah. This is how we do at Jummah. This is what you can do, what you can't do at the Jummah. See, there's a constrictive purpose for being at the Jummah, and that's the ayn that's giving it that reference. Tightening up of the space that's in your proximity. And even the folks who party hardy, When they go to the club, they call that a jam session, don't they? You go there, you listen to the live band, you say, oh, that's a jam session. And everybody in that club is there for that one purpose. You didn't come there thinking you were going to see a circus. You came there believing you're going to see a concert or you know, a band, or something that everybody is agreeing. That's why I'm paying this $10. I came to see this group perform. See? So it's the same thing. That's a jamia. Doesn't have to be Juma. It just has to be people gathering for a particular place in a constricted area. And what they all have in common, I repeat, is the J and the M. See, Jamma, Jamada, Jama'a. They all have the JM, which gives it its basic theme, coming together in abundance. And then the third letter is what adds the additional flavor to the soup. So the bilateral root word is jam, which by itself means to bring together. The third radical was based on the many ways in which people, places, things, etc., can be brought together. Now, I really need you to understand this point. It's actually my last point in tonight's discourse. The two initial consonants establish the major theme for that word and for all words that will develop from those two consonants. In this case, when you put the J together with the M, it's going to always mean to bring together. But when you put a third radical after the M, that's what's going to tell you how and even why things are being brought together. Does that make sense? You can just nod your heads. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. So some people are brought together for punishment. And some people are brought together for other reasons, for blessings. Jam means to bring together because of what the letters J and M mean. And there was a time in the history of the language where the linguist didn't know. They didn't know that the first two consonants that were together in the bilateral word, that they by themselves had meanings. They thought meanings only happened once they added that third radical at the end of those three. Then it meant something. That's how they used to believe. And that's how many of them still believe. They're not understanding that the J and the M, when put together as a biconsonantal word, already means something. It's already a sentence because each letter has its own individual meaning. So when you look at these two letters, Jim being the first one, this J, Jim. Jim means the movement of legs towards a water source or a primary source. The movement of legs, for instance, animals, people. The primal instinct in all life forms is to find out where the water is before they settle in a particular place. You have to know where the water is. Even if the bison and the buffalo are yards and maybe even miles out of the way, you can't have the water well or the river miles and miles away, something that you need on a daily basis. You have to have it where it's close to you, in proximity to you. So people would only settle their tribes, their family groups in areas where they had proximity to water sources. And I know that makes sense. And many skirmishes and even wars broke out based on people fighting over the water source. People saying, no, 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 you can't have access to this water because if you continue to survive and grow strong, you might become a contender for this part of the land where I want my family and my tribe to thrive. So you got to get out of here. That's how many, many wars in the ancient world amongst ancient people. That's how many of those skirmishes and those wars and that fighting broke out and stayed in existence, except that you can only kill, but so much before people say, wait a minute, we're trying to raise our children here also, and our grandchildren. We can't afford to get up every morning thinking about killing you. So I tell you what, we're going to have to come to a truce. We're going to have to come to some agreement. Now, what we're not realizing, unless we're standing back with a bird's view eye, is that the nature in the human being to come to the conclusion that we need peace in order to continue to survive. We can't just fight. That's not in the human nature. The human nature calls for peace. What they are not realizing that we in today's time can realize, because Allah is granting us an elevated level of cognition in this day and time. And I believe that that spark in our intellects, at least, was brought on by the level and the intensity of information provided to Imam Warithuddin Muhammad and others of his ilk, putting that in the atmosphere, constantly talking about the human being's moral and rational mind and the human being's moral nature and how your moral nature is the true human nature in you. He reiterated that so many times that you can't count the number of times he put the emphasis on moral mind. And what did he say was the symbol for morality and moral thinking? He said the symbol was water. So if you keep agitating water, the water will continue to be stirred up and it will never find its equilibrium point. It will never find its balance if you keep stirring up the water. You keep pushing at the water. And it's the same thing with the human being's moral nature. If you keep putting and pushing at the nature in the human mind that wants to become peaceful, it wants to settle. It doesn't want to be agitated. When it's time to travel on that water, you don't want it turbulent, you want it peaceful. The nature of water is to seek its equilibrium, to seek its level, to seek peace. That's supposed to be what a Muslim means. That's why the letter M is in the word Muslim and Salam and Islam. It's supposed to be about finding your equilibrium so that you can live in peace, not only with yourself and the people who look like you when you look at yourself in the mirror, but with everybody who's in your area. You want an agreement that says we need to be peaceful, at least with each other. We need to share the same moral principles. That's sharing the water. And they made agreements. They said, well, you come on Monday and we'll come for our water on Tuesday. And then we'll let the other tribe come for their water on Wednesday. And then we don't have to have this problem. And believe it or not, that's how Muhammad the Prophet handled the tribes around him when it came to teaching them al-Islam. Tribes that were enemies of each other. He said, well, this tribe, Banu, this one, you come on this day and I'll teach you what this deen is. And your rivals, they'll come tomorrow, same time, same place, and I'll teach them what. See, that's what came to be the earliest form of what we now call Jummah. Jummah was never, ever in the time of the Prophet on a special day of the week or a particular day of the week. It was any day when there was an agreement by the locals to meet in a certain spot for the purposes of learning the Qur'an directly from the one who was being gifted with the revelation. And then Muhammad taught other leaders in that society how to perform the same service. The word Jummah doesn't mean Friday. Friday means Friday. And Friday here ain't Friday there. Friday here could be Thursday somewhere else in the world. So it's not Friday as a literal day of the week. No, it was an agreed upon time that the smart ones in that society were able to canvass the people and say, what day can the majority of people make it out to the square or make it out to this particular area of the community so that you can hear the word of Allah directly from the mouth of the khatib and you can get explanations. And that's why Muhammad the Prophet was open, especially to those new people. He was open to Q's and A's out of nowhere. The man was the truest of human beings that human nature ever produced in this world. And the mullahs and the others who have presented his image to us did a terrible disservice to the entire world of human beings by painting him in his Arab nationalistic image that he never accepted to be in. Painted him in this overly machismo image, a man who laid with the 9 of his wives in one night. Oh, would I like to be like Muhammad? Those are the crazy, foolish hadiths that people have put on the rest of the world that cause intelligent people around the world to look at the deen and say, that's, I'll never join a religion like that, where women have no respect, they have no equality, they have no say-so, where the black people are called raisin-headed. You know, they ain't join no religion like that. They can refer to Bilal as a raisin-headed what? That if the son of a raisin-haired slave, son of a slave become your emir? Do you think Muhammad actually spoke like that? You out of your Muslim picking mind if you think that's a real saying or statement from the mouth of our prophet. And it's only because you didn't understand the lingo from that day and time. To call somebody a raisin-headed son of a slave back then is the same as calling somebody a broken down, stupid ass nigger in our day and time. Now, do you think, I ask you again, do you think Muhammad the prophet spoke like that? Are you going to call Bilal a son of a slave when I thought they freed him? So who are you talking about now? Bilal's son? Because Bilal, they say, was Ibn Rabah. He was the son of a slave. He was the son of an Arab master. Rabah, that wasn't his daddy. And the people you think are your daddy, Mr. African-American, black man, Negro, Bilalian, the people you think are your daddy, they ain't your daddy either. They're just another slave master. We're talking about the system that produced your mind. That's the slave master that's over you. So we need to come into a new mind. Imam Armaya, may Allah forever be pleased with his work. Armaya Numan. That was his theme. New mind productions. That's what we have to move towards. So that J and the M, just to conclude this point, is already a sentence. Jim, as I said, means the movement of legs toward a water source. And Meme represents the turbulence that's created in that water from being pushed or being magnetized by the moon. Huh? So it creates a turbulence. And that's where they got that glyph, the M, up and down, up and down. Those are waves in the water. So everywhere there's life that needs water to sustain itself, you're going to find their legs moving towards that source. That's Jim, Jim, Jim. It begins with the legs movement and it ends with the water source. It begins with the J and it ends with the M. And you see in the Arabic letter Meme, M-E-E-M, that it has 2 M's because the universe has 2 water sources. This earth that we're on, it has 2 water sources, not just one. When you pronounce the word meme, the first M is given an elongated vowel, E. See, me, and then it ends on M. But that second M has no expression. There's no vowel attached to the last M in meme. The first one has expression and it is readily accessible and available. Me, it's expressing. You can see it being expressed in the world. But that second one is closed. What does that represent? It represents the 2 sources of water for human beings on this earth. The first source is readily accessible to you in the form of rivers and lakes and oceans and puddles and all of that. That's right here on the earth. You don't have to go to any special place to experience earthly water, but there's a heavenly water that comes from the clouds above that only Allah can assign to your area. You see how that works? It doesn't reveal itself unless Allah opens it up to you. That's meme. So water represents earthly knowledge. The morals that you learn from your mommy and your daddy and your grade school teachers teaching you right from wrong, those are all earthly morals. You can learn that just from studying nature itself. But there's another level of water that you cannot access unless Allah reveals it to you. So the letter meme is saying the same thing that we said in the last class about the two ikras in the Quran. The first ikra, you can get that from any teacher. You can get that just from staring out your window and watching the clouds and watching the birds feed and bring food back to the young birds in the nest. And you can learn that all day long. But if you want to know how higher life is fed, only Allah can reveal that to you. That's not readily accessible. It's a different level of reading. So when Allah speaks about the skies, He calls it as-samawat. You see the meme in that samawat? There's a lot going on in that word. There's seen, there's a meme, and there's a wow. The letter seen, I've told you over and over again, represents the human intellect. Functionality in the human intellect. Seen is connected to the idea of teeth. And it's the chewing of the teeth that are responsible for keeping the teeth nice and bright, especially amongst ancient cultures who had miswak and other things that they would chew on, chew bark, tree bark, and it would keep particles from in between their teeth and keep their gums nice and neat and their mouth fresh. And so the teeth became symbolic of that which could be made brilliant. So it was symbolic of the human intellect that could be made brilliant by chewing on information, chewing on guidance. That's the letter seen. Then you connect seen in samawat to the meme that comes next, samawat. And we just got finished telling you that meme has to do with your exposure to moral knowledge, knowledge that's necessary for you to make adequate judgments and decisions concerning what's right and what's wrong for you to do, for you to think, for you to even feel. You're supposed to try to feel right. If you have wrong feelings and you know you shouldn't be feeling that way about that person, then you're supposed to do your best to say, Allah, help me not feel this way about this person. They don't really deserve me having this kind of malice towards them. It's just that, whatever. So your morals are to be regulated by what you know in the intellect to be right. So the seen is leading the way. Then the meme in the word for sky, samawat. So the wa is a connector. It's a connector. So something is necessary to connect what? The intellect, seen, how the intellect develops by chewing on information constantly, breaking down big ideas until they become smaller ideas, more manageable. And then handing that over to the moral nature to put the stamp of approval on it, because everything you take into your intellect is not necessarily something that you should bring into your life. Whoever invented the atomic bomb, their intellect did that, but should they have brought that into the human life and said, bump the moral thing? I know this can kill millions of people, but we want to be the superpower on earth, see? So they bypassed the moral nature and they accelerated the nature of the intellect. And as Imam Muhammad said, if you're operating with an intellect that's not giving the proper respect to your moral nature and decision making, he said, that is the making of a devil. All rational mind, inventive to the 10th power, but never allows moral influences to creep into that intellect to say, yeah, that's a great invention, but that's going to hurt people, so we can't do that. And then the intellect is supposed to say, you're right about that. See, that's the mind and the heart working together. But when you have just the brain working and trying to put the puzzles together, the pieces together, and it comes up with so many different ways, 500 different ways of killing people, and it never hands that over to the moral nature to say, is this really humanly right to do this? When you don't hand it over, like most people, leaders in the world today, they don't hand it over. Some are, but most aren't. They say, this is how we stay in charge of the world. We need more bombs. We need nuclear power. We need this, we need that, we need the other. Listen to that song called Power by The Temptations. See if you can get it to where you can see the lyrics. He said, I'll make you all the master race. Just put me in my godly place. We'll march the earth down in defeat. Take the fields of oil and the lands of wheat. One thing I must make perfectly clear, nuclear weapons all men fear. Their hands sweat, their fingers itch, and I'm the only one you can trust with the switch. Give it to me. Listen to that song by the Temptations. It's called Power. And it tells you exactly what's going on in the world today. You have to have a rational mind that's being balanced out by moral thinking is the point. Because that fire of the rational mind needs to be checked by the water of moral discipline. And people think you have to sit around and be like a guru or some person who's no longer in touch with the material world in order to have an activated pineal gland and all of that stuff. You have to be or you got to dhikr yourself until you start floating. Subhanallah, subhanallah. You got to be a whirling dervish until your feet leave the ground, and all of that has nothing to do with what we're calling the activated pineal. You don't find all that stuff in the Quran. You got to do this, do that, do this, do that, float, come back down, float again, come back. No, that's not what you have to do. Let me tell you the secret, and it's a short sentence on this. The secret of how to activate and have the power of the pineal gland, higher reserves, vibrations, frequencies, how to have it sustained for you. Now listen to this very carefully, and this will be my last statement. The key to the sustaining of pineal gland activation is to meditate, concentrate, and to do so on singular events or desires. And simultaneously, once you're finished meditating, observing, contemplating, asking Allah for results in a particular area, not that your mind is all over the place. You have to concentrate on singular ideas. That's what the so-called third eye is designed to do. Take what it is you're trying to resolve, or something that you're trying to learn, or something that you're trying to eliminate as a problem, and you have to be able to see the results of that thing after it has been eliminated from your life. You have to be able to see the results of that thing coming into your life if that's what you've been asking Allah for. You can't see it as something to possibly come. Maybe Allah will. No, you have to see it. If it's good, you should see it as something that Allah has already brought into your life. And only ask Allah to stop it from coming if it's going to be something that's going to injure you. Other than that, you should see it as already the done deal. As the Quran says, "Qad aflahal mu'minun," that the believers have already won through. They hadn't won through when that was revealed. They were still being buried up to their necks in the sand. That's why the prophet sent a contingency of them into Abyssinia to plead with the Nagus, the king there, for refuge. He sent those people at a time when it seemed as though the fledgling Muslim community, which was just a few dozen people, less than 100 people, they were being killed off by the pagan Arabs of their time. Their brothers and sisters, their uncles and aunties, they were killing those people off because they said, we believe in this revelation coming out of the mouth of Ahmed or Muhammad. We believe in this revelation. They said, get rid of them. We can't have this. These people tearing down our industry, these people tearing down our commerce. They're saying that these gods are not gods and there's some bigger God who's the only God. Now we accept there's a bigger God because we say Allah is God also. See, people don't know that. The pagan Arabs said Allah is God. They say that in the Quran. The prophet asked them, well, who is this God? They said, who's God? Allah. They knew Allah was God, but they didn't believe in Allah as being a singular and unique God. They said Allah was a God amongst a pantheon of gods. See, Allah is God, overseeing all. He's the only one who can't eat, doesn't sleep. They believed all of that already before the prophet started teaching. But they said, however, Allah has left a pantheon of lesser gods, 360 of them. We have them housed in and around the Kaaba. So that's who we give obeisance to also. And that's what the Quran came to destroy. That's why it says, La ilaha illallah, that there is no object of devotional attention anywhere to be given that kind of obedience. The only power to be given that level of obedience is Allah. And Allah wants you to give obedience to the excellence in your own human nature, because Allah doesn't need anything from you. Allah doesn't need any slaves. Let's make that correction on Imam Adib's statement earlier. Allah doesn't need servants and slaves. The Quran never speaks about Allah having servants. And I know they translate it like that. Abdullah, that doesn't mean servant, and it doesn't mean, what does the creator who owns everything, who says that he is El Ghani, he is the super duper 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 rich, and he owns everything and has no needs for anything, not even for rest and sleep. He needs you to be a slave for what? To do what for him when he has everything? The only benefit you can bring is to yourself. You can't do anything for Allah as a slave of Allah. What does Allah need a slave? That makes him a slave master. Listen to these words as you repeat them to yourself. The word abd does not mean slave. Not in that part of the world. The word abd meant slave and servant in the part of the world where the Persians were ruling. In ancient Persia, ancient Iran, that there, the word abd meant slave and servant, because they bootlegged and jacklegged the Arabic language and retrofitted it into an Indo-European paradigm of language. So many of the words that you're reading in the Quran that are translated this, that, in the third way are not fitra-based Arabic concepts. So although you're reading what you believe to be Arabic, the translations in your head are actually from Persian script, not from Arabic script, because the Arabic language, as we've been repeating over and over again, is based on the fitra. So if you can't prove it from the fitra, then it's not real. That word abd, the Ain, Beit, Dal word is what we're discussing. And that open A sound in the form of the letter Aleph and Ain at the beginning of a word, they're gutturals. They come from the back of the throat. Ain from the back of the throat. Aleph from the back of the throat. That's why the letter Aleph has a Hamza that's giving it that sound. It has a Hamza at the top of it. In fact, they say that Aleph is merely the chair for Hamza. The real letter is Hamza, which cuts the breath. So you have that. the leading letter, Aleph, that sound, that open A sound, A all over the world is normally the first letter in most alphabets that I've investigated, no matter what the alphabet is in the world. The letters A, that sound is the beginning letter. So it represents leadership. That's why it's in the words for mother, Amma, and father, Abu, and brother, Akh, and sister, Ukh, because the Aleph is leading and is training leadership within all of the members of the family. So what's the B and the D in Abd? The B and the D, when you put them together, represent something temporary. And this, again, my friends, is the meaning for BD everywhere you go in the world. Look at that in the English language. Look at it in the English language. You have the word bed, B-E-D, the BD. What is a bed? It's a place of temporary rest. You don't live in the bed unless you're paraplegic or something and you can't get out of the bed. That's different. Then you live in the bed. But other than that, the average person just spends a certain number of hours resting in the bed. To do what? Re-energize the body. So a bed is a place of temporary repose. What about your children who go to school and you get a report that says they were bad that day and you chew little Timmy out? Your teacher called to say that you were acting up in class today. Why were you so bad? What was on your brain today? You left here in a good mood. What happened? When I got to school, Johnny was, now, all right, you better not do that again tomorrow. I love mommy, because bad is temporary behavior. It's not how the child is all of the time, every day. It's temporary behavior. BD means temporary. D interchanges with T. So if I place a bet at the horse racing track or wherever they do that, right? That bet is temporary. I'm either going to win or lose. Once the horses come in, it's the end of the bet. I have either won or lost, because BT as well as BD represent temporary things. If I bite into my sandwich, am I just going to continue all day long? I leave the restaurant, I'm still in the subway. No, biting is not forever. Biting is temporary, so that you can replenish the system. Going to bed is so you can replenish the body and its energies. Betting is so that you could win money and live a better life. See, all of the BT and BD words are for purposes of adding something constructive to the life. If I'm in prison, they call it doing a bid. If I'm a lifer, that's not a bid. I live there. But if I'm doing, 5 to 7 years, it's a 7 to 10 or something like that, even 10 to 20. After 20 years, if I'm still alive and I've completed my bid, then they have to let me out, because the bid was supposed to be temporary, BD. So now that you know BD means temporary, what does abada mean? That first letter is what is called the A privative. It's also called the A of negation. And I'm not writing it down on purpose, because I've spoken on these things in numerous past classes. So just take the time when you listen to the replay to write it down. I'll spell it for you. A privative, Privative. And also the A of negation, Negation. To negate is to cancel out. Privative is to deprive. So the A on the beginnings of most words, regardless to the language, it means that when you see that A at the beginning of the word, it cancels out the meaning of the word that comes after it. Simple examples in English: amoral, not moral. Asexual, not sexual. It cancels out the meaning of the word after it. So what is abada, abd, with the a privative on the beginning of it? It means not whatever BD means. What does BD mean? Temporary. So what is Allah saying when he calls us his abd or his ibad? He's saying that your relationship with him is not intended to be temporary. How beautiful that is. See, when you call yourself a servant of Allah, look up the word servant. That's not a lifelong thing. That's a 9-to-5 thing. Or that's a 3 days a week thing. Or that's a 6 days a week thing with 1 day off. It's temporary. You want to be a servant of Allah? What are you serving the rest of the time when you're not serving Allah? You said, well, that's why I'm saying I'm a slave, because a slave is a slave forever, ain't it, Imam? Yeah, but guess what the difference is? No slave likes being a slave forever. The slave's emotional disposition makes the slave uncomfortable, being a slave 24/7 to another person. That's not the relationship that Allah has established between himself as the source creator and the human beings who have been given a measure of power and authority in the earth to be miniature creators, small c, meaning you can be inventive and you can be people who like your Elon Musks and whoever you think, Tesla, people like that who invent things, but they know they're not the source creator. They know that their powers are temporary, but that's not what we are with Allah. With Allah, he negates the temporary connection between ourselves and him. And he establishes the permanence of relationship between himself and his human creation. That's what makes the relationship between the source creator and the supposed force creators, humans. That's what makes it so special. Because the more we serve the interest that Allah has established in the Quran for us as human beings, the more we realize that we are so far away from understanding the true essence of who this source creator actually is and what he does. We can't even find the right words. We have to use words like he, when Allah is not even a gender. So the easiest way that I found to introduce this word Allah to the English-speaking brain is by substituting the word Allah with the English word allow. Allah is the one who allows us to do what we do. And you know what an allowance is? So think of Allah as the one who is constantly providing you with your daily allowance. He allows you. That means he's giving you permission. How is he giving you permission? Because he's signing off on certain things that he allows you to do. That's what Bismillah is, as we said, beginning with Allah's signature. Where are his signatures? You have to study the signs in nature. That's what the word signature means, signs in nature. The Quran calls it the fitrah, and the Quran also calls it Allah's ayat, ayatullah, the instructing signs and miracles that Allah has strewn all throughout creation. Everywhere you look, it's a miracle. If you can't see the miracle right away, just take a looking glass, a powerful looking glass, an electron microscope or something, and put that thing that you thought wasn't moving at all, put it under that microscope and see if you start seeing particles and waves and all those other kinds of things happening. And it's like, well, how did the moving thing become a part of this thing that I thought was rigid and unmovable? That's the miracle. And that's the one that we give our appreciation to as being the source creator of all things that we know about, things that we don't know about. And there are many more things that we do not know than we will ever know. So it's the knowing that is connected directly back to whatever created this cosmos, because most of the cosmos, we will never know what that is. That's what knowing and knowledge is all about. And that's the reason for us wanting in our souls to be appreciative of that Rabb force that is constantly creating and constantly evolving and providing a sustaining factor for the things that we develop into that Allah deems good, healthy, and wholesome. He sustains that growth. Even as you begin to grow old, biologically speaking, he still sustains that wonderful nature that you grew into as an opportunity through the cycles of development that we went through in this life, from childhood and teenagehood and young adult and the older adult, middle age, the older, the elder, and all of that, all the way up. And some of us are living up into 100 and 102, 107. We know some, we have, I think the oldest learner with us is 85. And that woman sounds like a teenager in my ears when I speak to her on the phone. So all of those numbers and all of that, I'm old, I'm decrepit. No, you're not. Not as long as this brain is working. So I was going to say that the thing to keep in mind when you're reaching that level of pineal gland activation, what keeps it activated is not yoga, it's not physical ritual prayers, it's not any of that. Once you learn to go within yourself and quiet all of that noise and focus on single events and single outcomes for things, you have to immediately back that spiritual exercise up with practical giving. In the Quran, it's called as zakat. Most of the places in the Quran where you read the word salat, it is followed up with zakat. And it doesn't mean to go and give 2.5% of your wealth. It means to do any level of good that is going to serve the purpose of purifying your spirit, purifying the knowledge that Allah is gifting you with. So even those of you who are still making that ritualistic prayer 5 times a day, fine. It's not going to hurt you. The only thing that will hurt you is when you include words in the salat that are directed towards other than Allah. So when you start introducing prophets and humans and families of people and the family of Ibrahim and the family of you start introducing, Allah says that prayer is for Allah alone. That's in the Quran. Prayer is for Allah alone. That means you shouldn't be mentioning any other person, place, life form while you're dedicating that service to your source creator. So the first thing you can do, you don't have to, it's up to you, is just go through the words in the salat and extract out any words that refer to other people other than Allah, including Muhammad and Ibrahim. Take them out. You don't even know how they got in there. It's not in the Quran. The tashahhud, it's not in the Quran. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim. That's not in the Quran. You need to start questioning where these things came from. Not with any kind of vengeance spirit, but with the spirit of curiosity. Well, if it's not in the Quran, and if different groups of Muslims, the Sunnis say it this way, and they add Ali, the Shiites add Ali, and the Sunnis add Muhammad and Ibrahim, and so it's all over the place. Well, how did that happen? You need to start studying that history. And that's how you're going to become more refined. So if that salat that was 7 minutes long whittles down to 3 minutes long, so be it. You dedicated that movement and that regimen and that discipline solely to your source creator. How is Allah going to punish you for that? Because you didn't mention Muhammad and you didn't mention Ibrahim and you didn't mention the family of Muhammad and the family of Ibrahim. Hey, Abu Lahab was the uncle of Muhammad the Prophet. So when you say Allah bless the family of Muhammad as you bless the family of, are you including Abu Lahab and Abu Jahl, his uncles? What makes the family of Muhammad and the family of Ibrahim so holy? What makes these people holy? So you got to be careful how shirk becomes subtly introduced into your deen. Those were his family members, some of the most vehement enemies of Muhammad the Prophet in his day and time. People trying to outright kill him were his blood relatives. Think and think again. Stop letting these people pull that sheepish wool over your eyes. That's the only way we're going to go to be successful. So again, take time to yourself. Stop being so busy with the world and so busy with your family's needs and all of that you can't take 5 minutes 2 or 3 times a day during stated times of the day, as the Quran says. Particularly right there in that Fajr moment, right before that sun comes up. Allah says that is the best period for shaping the word, the kalima, the reading of the Quran, assessing, asking Allah to open up the portals of understanding necessary for you building the excellence in your human life. Those are the moments in the day, not the busy parts of the day necessarily, but the times when you come home and stuff is done and your children are in bed and people are tired, you're tired, that tired feeling in you, right where you feel like I need to get some rest. That's the best time to speak to Allah. Right before you go to bed, right after you get up early in the morning for that first observance. Those are the 2 best times of day. The Quran calls them the 2 ends of the day. Those are the best times to make your plea to Allah. Why? Because Allah created the brain to operate on 5 essential brain wave levels. And that one we're discussing now is called beta wave. Read it, look it up. I gave it to you a couple of weeks ago. Go back on some of the older videos. Just a couple of weeks ago, I gave it to you. 5 basic brain waves. Read about beta or look it up. BETA. Alpha, beta, you know the rest. There are 5 of them. And all of those 5 are out of the Greek language, but they match perfectly 5 letters in the beginning of the Arabic language and letter system. Alpha is just Aleph. Beta is just Bait or Ba. Theta is just Tha. Gamma is just Jim. Delta is Dal. So although it's being expressed through the Greek language, it has compatible energies operating in the 5 Arabic letters that I just gave you, many of which are parts of your human body. That's what Qur'Anic is here to teach you. It's here to bring you into a level of understanding heretofore it hasn't been accessible to people like you and me. This, what I'm giving you, has not even been accessible to the elite of this world. That's why you don't hear them discussing it in their private meetings, because Allah has given us something above and beyond what they were able to snatch and gather and then corrupt in the process. And that's called the justice. And I repeat as I close out, Imam W.D. Muhammad was the #1 purveyor of that level of insight into those secret coded messages and language that were left by the social conspirators to ride above the heads of the common people. It's an amazing thing. Someone else has just commandeered my screen. I guess that's the message for me to close out. But I thank all of you, and I know no one is doing anything nefarious on purpose. These are just technical, whatever you call them. Right. Yes.
Yes, you asked me to remind you, we want to get the people from Atlanta, make sure that they give us, email and phone number to, so that we can coalesce around the proposed trip that you're going to make to Atlanta.
Yes. Let me just make sure, because you're coming out a little bit muffled, so I'm going to repeat your message. The people, the learners, the instructors that are in the Atlanta, Georgia area, we're asking them to put together a situation where I can be, I guess the word is hosted,
Yes.
in or around the city of Atlanta, somewhere in early October, I believe we're looking at.
Yes.
And I've been talking about this for at least 6 months already, maybe longer. But Wali Sabir is going to help spearhead the effort to bring me there for a weekend, maybe 2 to 3 days in October, where I can be live and in living color before the people who can make it there from the Atlanta area, since we do have so many people from that Atlanta area who can actually make this happen and have made it happen in the past. We've had Kareem Holiday and his family host us the last time we were there, and it was a wonderful event. I'm going to get back in touch with him to see if he can provide you some assistance. And there are others who are not regular learners that you would recognize by name, but Jamal Ali from that area and several others who are there, Khalil Sultan for sure, who can help bring people in. Our brother Wali, who you're seeing now, he's in that area of the of Georgia also. So we're going to look to put together, I guess it would be kind of a miniature Lunetics convention, just like a capitalized one, where there are 10 people, 20 people, whoever you can invite out. I think the place can accommodate about 200 people or so, 250 people. So we'll put that on the map. And if you're from that area, or if you're from a neighboring city or town where you feel you can still lend your assistance and make it in there and help with some of the logistics and some of the finances and those kinds of things, then leave your name, your phone number, and your email address in the chat box so that Baina can send that information to me. Make sure it's your full name, a working number, and an email address. And while he's going to help coordinate that and get in touch with you one-on-one to find out, so that you can get more information, and for him to find out what it is you could possibly do to help host your international instructor, Benjamin Bilal, as he gets back on the road, back on his pony, to visit you live and in living color, which I love to do. So please do that before the class concludes, and we'll be concluding in the next 3 minutes, inshallah. So do it now while you're thinking about it. If you don't have access to a computer to be able to put it in the chat box, then simply email it to me, cosmicquran1@gmail.com. All of you know the email address, cosmicquran1, the number 1, @gmail.com, COSMICQURAN1 @gmail.com. Okay. So I believe that should do the job, Wali.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. All right. So let's look at all of your beautiful faces before we close out. It's wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you again to our senior instructor, Muhammad Alim Ali, for the words of wisdom that he read from the quotation regarding Imam Muhammad's statements about, really, it was about esoteric knowledge, hieroglyphic knowledge, and to not take anything as being literal in the sense of literal when you read what you're believing to be scripture, because no scripture is speaking to merely literal ideas, things you could have just gone out there with your own brain and found out that God didn't have to inform you of. Scripture is only containing that which you could not have gotten with your intellect. The intellect that went to grade school and junior high school and college, that intellect, it cannot access the information that scripture has been designed to give you. The only way you can get that hieroglyphic, that hira information from on high, by situating yourself in the cave Hira. This is your cave Hira. This is Kahf, Surah 18, the cave, right here. See? The sleepers in the cave. You should know what that is by now. If the cave is the brain, then you can figure out the sleepers on your own, because that's most people. You'd be able to figure out the dog stretching forth its paws. A lot of this you can figure out on your own once you get some of the key symbols correct. And one of the quickest ways to do that is by getting my book list, if you don't have it, and ordering any one or any combination of those 19 wonderfully written books by yours truly. So email me. Say, could you please kindly email me your book list? And I'd like to start ordering tonight. That's how you get it. Do what smart people from other cultures do. When they recognize that they have people among them who are special people in terms of the ability to gather information that you could not have gathered on your own. Instructor Bilal has gone to many places that you would have never even known to go to. And then you come behind me and start following it up. You say, oh, he mentioned this, let me investigate. And now you're giving people information. There's always a touchstone. Allah says that your death and resurrection is as one soul. All it takes is one. Imam Muhammad was that one for many. I'm becoming that one for many more. Some of whom never heard of Imam. There are people on this call right now who never heard of Imam Muhammad. If they heard of him, it's a marginal. Yeah, I think I heard of him. I used to ask people when he was alive. I used to go to people on my job and say, have you ever heard of W.D. Muhammad? One said, yeah, he dead, ain't he? This was 1986. He asked me if he was dead, but that's not their fault. That was our fault. They knew who Elijah Muhammad was, but they didn't know who Wallace D. Muhammad was. That's because we were talking to ourselves and we weren't really out here spreading the word and teaching the message amongst the people. And if you're bold enough and courageous enough to admit that to yourself, that's the first step towards healing. That's the first step towards healing. Admit your deficiencies. Say, yeah, I wasn't out here doing my job. Uncle Pookie don't even know who W.D. Muhammad was. And he lived with us. While Imam Muhammad was alive, Imam Muhammad would come to my town. I'd go, me and my two children, and we sneak out the house past Uncle Pookie and never invite him out to hear Imam Muhammad. Wait, Uncle Pookie come in the house, he put his key in the door. I turned down the cassette, that has Imam Muhammad playing. I don't want to disturb Uncle Pookie. I know he might be a little tipsy now. This is Sunday or Saturday, and this is his drinking day. So, and you don't even tell Uncle Pookie that there's a sophisticated mind out here like W.D. Muhammad. And we went past that. We've gotten crazy now. Many of us have not even told our children and our grandchildren about this great man and this great mind. Mm-hmm. And that's a fact. And I don't care. I would stand in your face and tell you, you'd have to prove it to me that you have done all that you could do to introduce Imam Muhammad's language to your children and your grandchildren. I know the majority of you have not. You'd be living a better life if you did. I told my children one time, I said, listen, I hope you learn to understand these phrases. Man means mind, words make people. The day I see you having a disrespect for those two phrases, I will come into your bedroom and paint them on your wall. And the only way you're going to get rid of that is to bust down the wall, which has consequences, or to move and get your own place. I pay for this. I'll write what I want on my walls. If I had to go to that extreme to impress it upon their brains, man means mind, words make people. If that's all they knew from Imam Muhammad, they're going to know at least that. But they know much more than that because we stayed in their ears. And as they grew older, when they said, well, I don't want this part of it, or, I don't have time to study that part, ain't nothing off of me. This is not no blood lineage thing that we're in, where because I know certain things, my children automatically inherit it, or I established New Medicine Institute. When I die, it automatically goes to my children. No, it don't. It goes to the people who are struggling like you to maintain it.
Absolutely.
That's justice. I hand it to my children and they don't even know half of what you know. How are they going to maintain this? How are they going to have the proper respect for it? And they really don't know what it is. They just know watching your smiling faces. They hear about you staying here 6 and 7 straight hours, but they don't know why. They don't know what the attraction is. So that's justice. is all I'm saying. So struggle, strive, work, and study hard. And do not let foolish-headed knuckleheads get in your way or whisper things in your ear. It doesn't bother me what people say about me, but I certainly don't want it to interrupt your flow, because I know what to say to them. If they ever get in my face, I know what to say to them. And it'll be something that YouTube will censor me over. So I keep it to myself because they're just boys with play toys, as far as I'm concerned. But they don't understand that one of those play toys is actually dynamite. And it's just a matter of time before it blows up in their faces. So let's keep doing what we have been missioned to do. We have been truly missioned to remake this entire world by remaking the entire world of words. That's our job. Remake the world by remaking the word. Letter by letter.